Welcome to the Deer Society podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deer Society podcast. I'm Brian Lemke, joined by the whole Ducart clan, Mike, JJ, and Chris, and we are off and running in the season, and we got lots of big bucks down. We're going to talk about two of them down today, and it's been on fire. The last week has been crazy. The Deer Society team has just been lightening up in the woods, and a couple big bucks down. Chris, you have your big buck down. How's it feel?
I think I was first on the board too, wasn't I?
I think you were, yeah.
You were first, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Feels good because actually it's probably earlier than I think I've ever hunted much in like probably the last decade, and actually going out that early in the season hunting. Normally I'm just like trying to get squared away at work and then, saving my free time for, better time, but just had an opportunity at one, so I went for it.
Yeah, we'll get into that story here in a little bit. A buck called Prime Time, and definitely some strategy involved in that hunt. But, we're going to start by just talking about some overall strategy this time of year. So we're in the early parts of the October, what a lot of people would really consider the October lull. And I can tell you, it's feeling like fall out there. We have cool temperatures here in Minnesota. It's rainy today. I think it was like 45 when we came in here just a little bit ago. So it's feeling like those cool temps. But, strategies moving into this October lull, we've all had some success, in the past during this time. And a lot of it matches up with cold fronts and picking those windows and whether it's water or food or scrapes, taking advantages of those different things. So let's talk about some of that strategy. So JJ, what have you guys been up to? What are you doing during this time?
Yeah, as of today, we got 2 heavy days of rain coming in here. Started this morning. I know we've been game planning some stuff. You've been doing some stuff outside. These big, heavy rain storms. I don't even know if I'd call it a storm, but just a lot of rain coming in. Great time to put in new stands, new blinds, check your cameras, kind of get your boots on the ground. I know a couple of guys are going to go do some ground scouting, do some walks, check for scrapes. I know you did that this morning too a little bit. Checking for sign, just trying to, get on that hot sign because these bucks are going to be opening up these scrapes after all this rain. They're going to be, it's basically kicking off the pre-rut after this. I mean, we're mid-October. You could call it the lull right now, but I think after this cold front moves in, this rain dies off, it's going to be as prime as it gets.
Yeah.
October lull, we've just been, the Deer Society team's just stacking them up like cordwood. It's like, what the heck is going on? And, so JJ texted me the other day, there's no such thing as October lull. It's because it's a controversy, it's a sarcastic text, but yeah, there's a lot of people taking deer, and I'm thinking about it a little bit. Well, first I'll comment on what JJ just commented on. This time of the year, this is the perfect time when that the rain front's coming, is to gather your intel, figure out what your strategies are, and go ahead and do your tweaks now, right before that rain. Get that new stand in. I know you did that this morning, Brian. And JJ and I, we did it. We have a kind of a standing tail, I guess you would say, or I don't know how you want to say it, but it always seems like after the very first frost, and we talk about this all the time, after the very first frost, that's when the first big buck shooters start to show up at the areas where we would expect them to show. They have not been there all year. We don't have any intel on them at all. Don't even know if they're still alive, and boom, they just start showing up. And that happened again this year. We just got a frost a few days ago, and all of a sudden, boom, that one buck, he showed up. It's because now that Chris shot, we lost 2 good deer on the Deer Society property, and Chris really had the only shooter that we had intel on, and that was a different kind of a strategy than what we're doing now, but he can tell that story. So JJ and I don't have nothing to hunt. We were talking about that today. We're like, well, all the pressure's off because Chris got a deer. Now we're kind of like, do whatever the heck we want to do. We don't have to strategize for a third person. I'm kind of in a position where if I shoot something, great. If not, no big deal, because I'm retired. I can hunt whenever I want. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a crazy place to be. But before I ramble on too much, so we get this intel that comes because the frost shows up. And then we know the rain is coming, so now we're prepping. We put out a blind today. We tweaked up some stands, put some cameras out, and I just got to say, I think a lot of the success that we've gotten during this October lull, if that's what you want to call it, is from the reveals. I honestly believe that. We were able to gather data and make it work to our advantage. And it just made a huge difference,
Yeah, 100%, especially, during those times where deer aren't moving a whole lot. It's a little warmer and, they're still on a pattern. Patterns are shifting a little bit, but, they're not traveling a whole lot still, and if you're running reveals and you can catch those deer on a pattern, whether it's on water or, an early season food source, that intel is critical. And we get it right to our phone. So we don't have to go in there and bump deer just to get the intel. But that intel can be critical. I think right now, this time of year, if your cameras aren't on scrapes, they need to be on scrapes. And like you guys mentioned, you're out today, taking advantage of the rain and the wind, walking around a little bit, checking edges for scrapes, because as soon as this rain stops, those deer are they're gonna be hammering those scrapes, and it's a great spot to have your cameras right now. So if you're wondering where to put your reveals, where to put your cameras right now, go out there, pick some nasty weather, try to leave the least amount of scent as possible, but go and get your cameras on scrapes, because that's where they need to be right now.
Yeah, and that whole rain tactic, wash away your scent, high wind, high rain. We do that not only just right now, but all times of the year. I'm thinking back, Chris just shot this buck prime time. The first time you sat him, you saw him. Was it the first sit in there? You saw him, didn't give you a shot. Then I went in there and I trimmed that one lane.
Yeah, first day.
Because I had to check the camera. We had a squirrel chew through one of the wires of the solar panel. So had to do a little maintenance. Picked a day where it was windy, rainy. Did a couple things, and then I cut that one branch down on the elm tree right in front of you. Right in front of that stand. I think that's where you ended up shooting them too. So you can do those little tweaks all year. It doesn't need to be, it's not just like this thing we do in October. We do that all the time. That was in September. So
yeah, man, we didn't know if we were bumping deer in there or not. I shouldn't say we, I mean Chris, but because he's going in and then you're getting out and you're going to bump some does later on. And this deer is like right on top of him. It's such a cool story. I mean, and to have that many multiple encounters with that deer before you actually had an opportunity to release an arrow on him, that just doesn't happen with a 5.5-year-old buck. So, two things there. One is just super sick scent control. The other is making sure that you're getting in and out of your corridors correctly. And, if you're going to make those tweaks, let that scent get washed out. But habitat, that deer was so comfortable where he was, and he was so consistent with his behavior, and that's habitat all the way, I mean, he was hunting his deer in 90-degree weather. That's stupid. I mean, we don't get that kind of weather in October in Minnesota, but that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's hear the story, Chris. This is a deer that you guys had a ton of history with. A deer that coined the name Primetime. And you shot, what day did you actually shoot him?
So I actually shot him just before October, September 30th. So it was the last day of September. Like I said, a lot earlier than I typically ever get out and hunt. Because, I mean, really in Minnesota, it's really about 2 weeks of September we actually get to hunt, because it always starts in the middle of September. So you get about 2 weeks of September hunting. And, really it's that kind of time of year of, one, we're busy here ramping up on what we're doing. So, less like in this situation where we started getting some intel on him. It's not really a time where I set aside or focus a lot of hunting hours, you know what I mean? Like, unless you have something telling me, like, I got to be out in the woods. I usually reserve that time off and that time I take to, focus on the key prime hunting, that late October, early November timeframe that we usually are kind of shooting for as, these Minnesota whitetail hunters. So yeah, basically we were getting that intel. And I think how, like, you know, my dad and Mike here was setting it up is, you know, a lot was habitat based and stuff like that too, because it was stupid hot. Normally it's not like 80s, 90s for like an entire week stretch to cap off your last week or two of September going into October. And it wasn't moving much, again, because it was so hot. You know, they weren't moving much, but when they were moving to a strategically placed water source that we provided on the property that happened to also be next to, like you said, you know, an early season food source as well. We have one of our Illusion primetime food plots put in that area.
And cool bedding.
Yep.
Yep. They get cool, down in the cool areas in the bedding.
Yeah, and this setup is basically right in the perfect transition area to where we know they have a core bedding area on the property. They can move like pretty much right off of their bedding. They're right there to the water, right there to their first staging food source. And then just beyond that is, boom, their first big ag food source. So, I mean, they can transition as soon as they wake up. Right there, get some water, hydrate, grab a little food source, check things out, kind of communicate with the other deer on the property, and boom, move right out to their big ag food source. So, I mean, it was set up pretty prime.
Really good, yeah.
Prime time keeps coming up there. Prime time food plot.
Yeah, and it goes back to, he's basically the model to a lot of the food plot stuff we were filming at the back blind in that lush primetime plot. It's in the catalog. On the front of the brochure, you know, he's just that model buck, and that's kind of where he got his name. You shot him over the primetime plot. You had a brand new prime bow.
Oh, that's right. Everything was a prime. It was a prime hunt.
It was a pretty good deal.
Hey, is that the title?
We're gonna have to start calling you Prime.
Going back
Coach Prime.
to the buck a little bit. Started getting him on camera in 2020. He was just a small 8. Had him at about 2 years old, and then the next year didn't find his sheds that year. We didn't really find many sheds that year. 2021 turned into a 10, kind of a crooked, kind of a little mini skyscraper. You'd look at him and call him a mini skyscraper. Found his sheds over on the east in some hinge cut bedding we did with Andy. The next year was when he started to model a little bit in the plots. He was 4. Found one of his sheds in the new logging area this year, and then the neighbor found one of them. So we got a bunch of history, a bunch of sheds, and then this year he showed up. He didn't really change much, like didn't really grow the last couple of years at all, but he was super aggressive. And they're pushing out the other deer, pushing out like 4-year-old bucks, 3-year-old bucks. We got a video of him actually. We pulled the cameras after you shot him. We were reviewing some video the other day. I think it was a day or so before Chris shot him on the other side of the property. This primetime buck was over there. He did, you know, he's pushing this buck off, and he does a big snort wheeze on camera. So it's pretty cool. Actually, you can just see how aggressive he was. But he was one that you needed to basically get out of the area so he didn't take over the whole property for the whole year.
And push out all the up-and-comers that we really need, because
It's like it was a big time.
Yeah, well, how the season ended last year, I mean, right after the season ends, we figure out, you know, the number one guy, he goes down because of the cold. Then one of the other top 3 guys out there, he went down also shortly after the season just because of cold and natural causes. So like I said, it put that void on, okay, what are we going to do this year? What are our target deer? What are we seeing? And he was really the only one in the age structure above 4.5 that we had on the property consistently, you know, this off season and coming into, like, you know, the early hunting season. So it really kind of was the only one really on our list. And like I said, we have a good crop of like 3.5, 4-year-old deer that, you know, visually are probably more appealing and stuff like that than Primetime was progressing in his just his life and how he was, you know, his genetics were growing him. So yeah, he took over this core area, and I mean, in preparation, I guess, to, you know, create a little more room for these guys we want to keep on the property, have them make the home, you know, grow, that have good potential moving forward. Yeah, he was a pretty key target buck to get after. And the fact that we get after him so early in the season and really allow those deer, now that they're going to start changing their behavior during this October lull, like, it's going to allow them, you know, room to move in, because he was a little bit of a bully. He was pushing the other ones around.
Yeah, and there's a couple layers to that too, because, you know, he is a big-bodied buck. I mean, he was a beast. But, you know, we wanted to make sure that these other bucks were not going to get pushed out. And we knew that this was the core, becoming a core deer. But even up and above that, JJ and I had already shot our first bucks off the property. And so we really pushed to we want Chris to get his first buck off the property. I mean, that was our priority. It really was. And I understood that, with Chris's new responsibilities after I've left the company, I know how busy he is. I mean, 2 years before this, I only hunted one day. That's how busy it gets during the season. And so when this deer shows up and it's during this heat wave and the season's open, we weren't expecting nothing. I mean, I'm golfing every day, this and that. All of a sudden we get this intel, and this deer took over a core area of the property and an area he knew, and he took it over, and the elements were there, the water, and he became consistent. And JJ and I are like, dude, we got to get Chris on this buck. And so we were pushing him because we knew he was getting busy. It was like, dude, you got to hunt, you got to get out and you got to hunt this buck. I mean, we were putting pressure on him, in fact. And it's kind of a crazy story because he has multiple encounters with it and he just couldn't get the shot off, making the right choices. I mean, but the deer's at like 30, 35 yards and at one point 20 yards right behind him downwind. And it's just like, it was just, it was a roller coaster ride for him, man. It's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, Chris, walk me through kind of that story. So some of those encounters and just how it all ended up coming together finally.
Yeah, so I think it was maybe even starting right before that opening day or shortly after opening day of the archery season here in Minnesota. It was kind of almost clockwork. Like every day he was showing up on this camera by that stand at the water source. And it was daylight. So you're thinking 5.5-year-old deer, like, okay, daylight, but like the next day, daylight. 3 days in a row, daylight. And then he might, disappear for like a day or two, but then all of a sudden, like, he might come in early in the morning, so you knew he was coming back in the area, even though it was still dark early in the morning, but like you knew he'd be coming back in the area, and then you'd see him daylight another day or two. So when we knew I had to get on him, just because we're seeing that pattern, so he's going in there, when the cameras are telling us you have to get on him, he's patterning, he's daylighting. So I think the first day I went on there, now mind you,
he was going in there during even different winds too. Yeah. And so Chris had to wait for the right wind. Yeah. And then of course, I mean, walking at 80, 90 degrees to get to your stand, that's a brutal deal too.
A south wind, which means warm weather.
Had to have it.
Yeah, that stand does require a south wind. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't just, warm weather with a north wind. I mean, that breeze was warm, if there was a breeze. And I was getting a lot of block from the timber to the south of me, getting, because my wind's now blowing out to the north, the open field, away from the bedding area. So, I mean, the closer I would get to that stand walking, sun beating on me, I mean, it was quite the scenario. I mean, I'm talking like I'm walking maybe 20, 30 yards, and I just set the backpack down for like a minute or two just to like try not to overheat, because there's just no way to you could just be sunbathing and sweating. It was that hot out there. So that was one element to really have to like tackle and work against, is just getting in there without just completely blowing everything up, because you're trying to get on them and you're trying not to also blow out the area because you're trying to go hard on them. So I think the first day I got in there, I was going, everything was good. Normal sit, some fawns, some does come out early, pushing through. Small bucks start coming out shortly after. So I'm like, okay, timing can be pretty good here. And then, sure as heck, here he comes right by this water hole. And it was kind of a tricky setup. It was like, if they tuck up on this water hole, you don't have a shot. But between where the bedding area and the water hole is, you get a quick shot within range. But at the same time, it was like, do I just want to take the first shot I get at him? Every other deer was now pushing up in front of me. So I'm hoping that he's going to just turn and just, follow the script of other deers. He's going to give me a nice 17-yard shot. And straight from the water hole, straight to some other deer, back off to like, what would it be, my north
and west?
Yeah, my northwest. So he went completely the other way of every other deer. So I was like, really? Of course he'd be the one deer that didn't come up right in front of me like every other deer.
But he heard deer out there in another plot that we got over there. A deer was blowing, and you say that you might have thought that she picked up on something, or whether it's movement or scent or whatever, but he took it as, there's a doe over there, and it didn't spook him, but he kind of walked his way that way. And so then we had a conversation after that night. He calls me and I said, dude, you need to really lotion down good because there's nothing you can do there to not break a sweat. So you just have to gob that lotion on. I mean, just gob it on. You know what I mean? And just do your best just not to overheat. And then the next scenario paid off.
The next scenario was actually I wasn't there and we saw him.
Well, that's
So
right.
I just got a new bow in I think that day I went out hunting or the next day I went out hunting. And so I knew I had to spend some time trying to get that new bow set up.
Prime just sent us brand new bows, and they're not released, and we can't talk about them, we can't show them, we can't do anything. And we had to secretly go get it set up with a dealer, no pictures, no nothing. And, you know, there's just, by the way, there were just rave reviews on that bow between everybody that's shooting them. And I just kind of wanted to throw that in there, but that's why he didn't get out, because he got that bow overnight, but then he had to go get it set up and be confident with it.
Yeah, so I just got that new Prime bow, which, yeah, I do love it. It's a great bow. I noticed the difference as soon as I started shooting it. But of course, as I'm getting it set up, as soon as I get done setting up, there was maybe a very, very risky marginal window of like me coming in a little late to that stand, talked to JJ a little bit, or like, let's just hold up. There's no point in going in there and blowing things up. And I think maybe like an hour or two later, JJ texts me and said, well, look who showed up. And of course, it was daylight again. So I'm like, of course, why not? So then I go out 2 more days. We had seen him come and move him back in on camera, so we thought he'd be in the area. 2 more days of hunting and just didn't see him that day. Now, we did catch him on cameras, other cameras in the area, but not that day. So then fast forward one day on the weekend, I don't think I could hunt because I had my daughter that day. But then the very next day, I had a little window and I got out there and yeah, again, pretty standard. It seemed like every hunt, it was like almost like, I don't know if it was the same exact deer or what, but it was like, oh, here's that fawn. Okay, here's that fawn and the doe. Oh, here's now the rest of the does coming up. Okay, well, here's these 2 smaller bucks. And they would just come and, you know, they'd check out the area underneath me. But another buck we got coming up came out, what do we call him? Buckthorn? Buckthorn.
Buckthorn, yeah.
So first he kind of comes from an area where I can't quite see, but I see him. And he's got a similar rack to actually Prime.
Genetics, yeah.
So, like, it's a very similar shape. And I'm looking through the cedar at the water hole. I'm like, is that him? I'm like, okay, well, I don't see this flyer on the left. Like, no, that's not him. He's missing the 4, isn't there? Like, on Prime time. I'm like, okay, so it's not him. And then all of a sudden, he turns around, and all of a sudden, he's meeting up another buck, and it's Prime time. I'm like, okay, here we go. We got some time here, too, because it wasn't, like, right before dark. You know, I had at least, I don't know if what time, but like 30, 45 minutes still before the final shooting light. So I'm like, I got some time here, so let's see how this plays out. So got some good footage. They're sparring up there by the water. They're getting some water. They're drinking it. And that day, some of these dills were actually kind of working up behind me in my stand because we've had a really heavy acorn crop. And I've kind of been hearing that around the country. I think there's a big heavy acorn crop going on this time of year, and specifically this year. And so every time I'm hunting the stand, I'm in an oak tree, and it just sounds like it's raining the entire time. And like the whole valley, it was a bunch of oaks, and like it just sounded like it's raining acorns all the time. And so a lot of times these deer were feeding in underneath my stand on multiple occasions on these hunts. And here come getting me with buckthorn and Prime time working up behind me, which isn't the greatest scenario. I mean, I can get a shot behind me, but it's a little trickier, especially because JJ put up this new camera stand. It actually had another element behind me in that window trying to get a ball around, camera around, because I'm self-filming. So this is my first time, hopefully, going to execute on harvesting a deer while self-filming, you know what I mean? Which is a whole nother element. So they get down behind me, and I have them within 20, 30 yards and scrambling around me, getting some really great footage. Couple times I thought I was going to get a shot, and he just was playing hardball, like just didn't want to come in. And finally he's walking away, and I'm like, now he's going north to the beans, and, I'm done for the day, and I'm going to have to blow out the beans to get out of here. So, like, I might be double whammying myself not getting the shot, and he's going to go, and I just had him within, 15 yards. And somehow he decided to go back to that water. Somehow JJ cut the right elm tree branch, and he pushed out from there, and I'm like, well, I got 13 minutes left to do it, so That's when I went out and took my shot.
Yeah. Don't give away too much now. There's still got the hunt breakdown to come.
I've never done a hunt breakdown in that song.
Right on. No, that's awesome and well deserved. You've put in your time here over the years, and when you can, both here in the office grinding and out there in the tree stand too. So I know these guys and everybody here was super super happy to see you tag out on that buck. And what a great deer. I mean that thing is a 5.5-year-old beast and a great buck for anyone, and definitely one that you want to not only get out of there, but I mean, he's a trophy, and to capitalize on him early like that, and the strategy that went into it. I mean, using the reveals and just, when I look at that spot, that's it. It's just like that core area of, water, food right there close to their bedding where they don't have to go far. They feel comfortable. It's secluded, but then the access to, you can access it with a south wind, slip right in there and slip out without doing damage. You hunted that deer, 5 times? And, he was obviously still feeling comfortable right there during the early season. That's pretty impressive.
Well, and then there was a little window there where that break where he said he couldn't get out. That water was getting so low, they couldn't even hardly get to it. They were hitting it so hard. So I snuck out there with the new electric Polaris during a really windy day and just slid out there and filled that thing up and got out of there. And it's just like it never missed a beat.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool too.
I think that was the day I was getting my bow set up.
It could be, yeah.
And so he actually showed up a few hours later that evening.
Yeah, that evening after I filled the water, he showed up. You're right.
And knowing his core bedding area,
because all 4 of us sat here and we debated that, remember? And even, Ben Rising was here too, and we were like, what do you think, Ben? What do you think? What do you think? And I'm like, well, I'm telling you, man, I think we got to get the water in there. I said, that's, to me, is the most important. And JJ's like, I'm not sure. And Chris, what do you think? You're hunting them. And Ben's like, I got to agree with Mike. So we all just kind of came together and said, well, let's go for it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's a water tank, one that we put in that spot. And we think it has a crack because it keeps going down like an inch a day.
Yeah, somebody went in there and drained it and brushed. I might have cracked.
We need to re-strategize that whole thing next year. Maybe dig a natural one or something. But it is in that spot where it's probably the closest you could get to a really good bedding or core area on the property with, like you said, like perfect access. Really get in and out, hunt undetected over and over. That's probably the best setup maybe we have or ever had. It's that good a spot, so it could produce again if another buck shows up. That's kind of the goal of, shooting the 5-year-old deer that was bullying everybody else, is because this area is so good. It's such the core of what we have for a property that we feel like another deer of that age or older could shift into that spot and we can get another crack later in the year. So,
well, we really set that place up pretty good because, it kind of reminded me. So the next day when we had to track him and figure out where he was, we went straight from that water tank straight to probably where he'd been bedding this whole time. And it wasn't, maybe not even 100 yards.
Yeah.
It took us right over that one bedding knob where it just reminded me of that one time. Can't remember if you were with us or not, but I think it was it a year or two after Andy had done that hinge cut on that knob? He's like, here, let's just walk down here. We walked.
Just see what it's like.
It just felt like you're in that closed, cozy room. So, that's that prime bedding knob we created with that hinge cut. Straight to that water, strategically placed, straight with that food source.
It was the craziest feeling walking out on that point because we got out there and we just stopped and he goes, you feel that? And I go, God, it's like you're in almost a soundproof studio. And he says, and what do you see out there? He goes, I call it gray matter. And it was all this stuff coming up and growing from underneath that never had an opportunity. And it was like this little tiny sticks and plants coming up, and it was just like this gray matter, and you couldn't see far anymore, and it was just the coolest feeling.
Well, and again, when we were tracking that morning, we were 50 yards past the water tank up into that little draw, pushing up towards that bedding knob, and probably 50 yards from the bedding knob, and all of us are turning like
yeah, he's buck. I smell a buck.
Just buck. So you knew it was just heavy bedding area where the buck was hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah, even fast forward from that gray matter day to, that day when we tracked your buck, Chris, I even turned around and I said it to you again, Mike, like I could not believe what it looked like in there versus where it started before the hinge cutting. It was actually unbelievable to see it in there. It was just this gnarly, wicked bedding area that just screamed big buck. It was awesome. It was pretty cool to see that whole process, see it all the way before, and now a few years later after. It's obviously paying dividends, which is pretty cool. One of the cool things about this, too, is hunt breakdown. Chris, your first hunt breakdown, and it's actually going to go this year. So typically hunt breakdowns are year delayed. So if we shoot bucks this fall, do the hunt breakdowns release next fall. But this one, because you shot them early, we're gonna go ahead and release it this fall. We're gonna kind of line it up with that release of the prime bow, so that should be pretty cool. Kind of spearhead that bow release. That should be pretty exciting to look forward to this year.
Yeah, like I said, this is my first hunt breakdown, so it's gonna be new for me. Interesting transition. I mean, it's been several years since I've shot a buck. I've had a few does here and there, but several years since I've actually shot a buck, and it feels nice to finally get one. I think this was a great buck to get one. I don't know if it feels like I was kind of being stubborn, but it was good to get one under my belt too, because you just need to get out there and actually execute. Feels like being around all you guys that are always shooting big deer every year. Like, I was part of the team, I was on the practice squad, but I feel like I've been on the practice squad since the JV team, and I just keep going to varsity practice squad, minor league varsity, and now I'm on the pro practice squad. Now I actually get to play. So.
What's funny about that is he was being very picky. I mean, he says stubborn, but he was being pretty picky. Me and Jed are like, dude, why is he not shooting that buck? And we're not going to force him, But
yeah, it's a whole nother game once you're actually out there executing. So it's good to actually go out and execute on, because there's a whole lot of more elements coming, especially with the self-filming and waiting on a mature buck. It's
a different level, yeah.
Yeah, it's and maybe that's a good lead into Adam's first buck. It's you're around it for so long. Chris has been around everybody shooting deer and the hunt breakdowns, all that stuff for so long. Now he finally got one. Adam getting his first buck. He's been producing videos, been around so much of it, filming hunts. But to be behind the bow, be behind the crossbow, looking through the sights, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, no doubt. So I don't want to give too much of the story away, because we're going to do a pretty wicked film on it, and I want to get Adam in here in the podcast and talk about the whole story behind it. But we can definitely talk about some strategy. So just to set this up, so Adam has produced hunting content, in the edit room back there, and filmed hunting for, probably the last decade. But never hunted himself, never grew up in a hunting family. He's got some boys that are growing up now, 5 and 3, and he's been around hunters, been around you guys, been around us, for the last however many years, and sees the values that hunting breeds, and sees the ethics and molding of people just through hunting in the outdoors. And I think that's something that sparked him to really gain an interest in wanting to learn to do it for himself, because he wants to pass that along to his boys. So I won't get into that anymore, because there's some pretty cool stuff coming. But anyways, last year started his journey for his first buck, and got him set up with a 10-point crossbow. And we hunted a few times last year and had some unbelievable sits, some really, really great sits. Saw a bunch of deer. But I think for him it was kind of that same. It wasn't a greed thing or a selfish thing. I think it's just stems from him being around all these other people and seeing all these big deer all the time, and already ingrained in him was this idea that he wanted to shoot a more mature buck, and he wanted to shoot, so it was so he passed some deer up, and which was fine. And I told him, whatever you want to shoot, you shoot. If it makes you happy, that's what you should do. And he just had this goal set for himself. And, it was cool because I didn't know how he would react. He's seen so many deer get shot.
Yeah.
Behind the camera and behind the computer screen, more deer than I can even explain to you. But I didn't know how he would feel actually pulling the trigger when that time came, and he spent a ton of time shooting that 10-point crossbow, and it was just every time he's just, I'm dialed, I'm ready, no jitters whatsoever. Well, fast forward to this year now, and Man, what a deal. So we had spent a lot of time out there on the property we have here in Minnesota, and we planted a primetime food plot, and it was actually a primetime food plot from the previous year. So we had planted it in primetime the year before that, and hunted over it quite a bit out of a blind, more late season though, and had some of the best sits that I've had here, and he passed some pretty good deer. A couple 3-year-olds in particular that were pretty nice bucks.
Yeah.
But he just had that goal set. So anyways, fast forward to this year, there's a bunch of bucks around in this primetime plot this year. Just, it looks immaculate. And we had fenced it off, and it was just like, it was money. Like, I went out there and I'm like, this thing looks amazing, but it's fenced off. And I'm like, man, we got to get this fence down. And the strategy was, we're going to pull half of it down, because a big thing for us was, okay, we want that food source for later too. And, we wanted to keep the deer out of it as much as possible, but I'm like, we need to take advantage of this now. So I went in there and I pulled down half of the fence on the food plot, and it was like, bam. And it was the same thing that when we did it last year. It was like deer flooded to it. It was like, the gates are open, here we go. And, had a reveal set up there, and it was a little different than your story. So I was getting this reveal intel, and there was deer on it solid, like, early in the afternoon. There was probably 20 deer coming out there, but no bucks. A lot of does. Now there were bucks other places on the property, but we didn't have really good buck intel there. But I'm like, man, we got to go in here and hunt, because there's going to be a night where a buck shows up here, whether it's now or whether it's in a week. Like, all the bucks are going to be there. So we got a perfect wind for it. And it was super windy, actually. Went out there, climbed in the blind, and we have it set up. So we planted one of your guys' the illusion test screens there, and we have a blind kind of in there, tucked in there, so we can slip right up the backside, slip through that screen, and get in the back of the blind without the deer theoretically, knowing we're coming or going. Well, sure enough, we get up there and get to the back of the blind, and I kind of peek over the side, and there's 2 does standing at 40 yards in that plot already. We tuck right into the back of the blind, get all set up, open the windows. Those deer were still standing there at 40 yards when we were all set up, ready to go. So kind of a cool setup there, just the way we can get in and out without those deer knowing. So lots of deer out there, feeding in the primetime plot, and sure enough, half an hour before dark, here come 3 bucks up this logging road. And again, I have not seen these bucks. It was just a matter of time, but I have not seen these bucks in this food plot up until now. And they come right in there, and they're feeding kind of out on the edge. One buck turns, and he kind of runs right at us out in the middle. And Adam's like, oh, that's a shooter. So that was, without giving too much away, that was it. Adam made the shot and ended up with his first buck, and just a beautiful, beautiful deer. One of the coolest things about it, not that there needed to be anything cooler, but so that buck was one of the 3-year-olds that we had filmed in that food plot late season the year before. And I would bet you that he was standing within probably 10 yards of where Adam shot him the year before. So like, cool history there. Adam was tickled pink. I can't express his emotion for him, but like, I can remember feeling and seeing him like, it was like this overwhelming excitement of, did that just happen? Did I just do it? Did I just shoot my first buck? Like, and it was so awesome. And to recover him, and that, it was like not a relief, but like just this overwhelming emotion of all different sorts when, to watch him there and pick up his first buck. And yeah, it was pretty cool deal. But the strategy there, it was, man, that food source was huge. We had it fenced, brought the fence down, and the deer they just flocked to it. Even it was hot that day too. But the does were coming in there to feed, and we knew it was just a matter of time. And I'm sure now, as the season continues, there's still 20 does coming into that food plot. Oh, yeah. Like, it's going to be buck central here in as the pre-rut hits here.
Yeah. So, and then when you're saying fence, the reason you did that, because of how many does were in there, like the areas that he had outside of the fence were just dirt. Like,
oh,
it was planted.
Really?
There were no plants.
Yeah.
So that's why the fence is there, is because there would not be a plot.
Well, remember now, we were literally in severe drought the entire summer and growing season.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long we went without rain. And then we just happened to get, a month ago, 4 inches of rain came in. Yeah. And then the temperatures cooled down after that heat. I mean, so we got the rain, it stayed hot, then it cooled down, and now we're going to be getting more rain, and these plots are really coming back. I mean, I'm amazed.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think, I chalk it up too, like, and that's the coolest thing about the Aleutian food plot system, and not just to boast about it here, but really, we went in there and we strategized on when to do that root booster and when to do that foliage field plus, those 2 fertilizer applications afterwards.
Yeah.
Like that plot you were in there, it didn't look great. Like it looked okay, but like
stressed.
It was stressed.
Yeah.
Trying to find a plant.
And we timed it, and I went in there and put those 2 applications on it, and it was like, bam, I think that helped to push through. We fenced it. And it's cool because, like, we didn't fence the whole entire thing. So there's probably a 20-yard buffer on the outside of that food plot that was not fenced that is bare freaking dirt. Yeah. And the inside of that thing is lush, knee-high brassicas. And it's like, you look at that, and you see the stress that the deer put on it outside of the fence. And, just fencing that off was
strategy.
Huge. Yeah.
Huge
for it.
So another interesting aspect of that hunt too. You went out there on an extremely windy day. I think I joked like, hey, is your blind still sitting there?
You did.
Because it was, 20 mile an hour? 15,
Yep.
20?
Yep.
But you were playing a west wind, and you said it was going north and west and east. And, I mean, some of those extremely windy days, it's not what you think it's going to be. It's a good learning.
You
get in there and see it in person.
You think you get those strong wind days and the wind's going to blow true, right? Like you go out there, if it's 2 miles an hour or 3 miles an hour, you get some of that wind drift and doing some weird things. But like you think, okay, I got a strong wind, it's going to blow that way. Well, I'm watching that screen and like the weeds around us, and I can see and throw wind floaters, and that wind will push real hard west and then suck back east, and then it's blowing north, and it blew every single direction. And I think another thing, when that wind is so strong like that, those deer, they're just skittish. You know, like their senses aren't as good as they want them to be in those conditions. So they're on edge, they're skittish. All the does even, feeding out there, they do that little like jolt kind of deal and look around. But man, when that buck entered the food plot, it was like, I'm here. He didn't give a shit in the world. He just wanted to come in there and feed. And as far as I know, that was his first time in that plot. Now, I'm not saying that I get a picture of every single deer in that plot, but man, he came in there and he's ripping up brassicas, and
cool.
It was pretty wicked.
So, yeah, that was one thing that was interesting about your hunt. And then Chris's hunt, when he showed us the footage, because I didn't know how, great the footage was going to be. Your cell filming is thick. But then, you had the primetime sparring with buckthorn, and then they went behind you and ate in those acorns, and you're filming them for 15 minutes right behind you. I was like...
And they were directly downwind at that point, too.
And that was an element. So, like, you watch the cameras, you think deer doing this for this reason. Like, think, okay, he's bedded here, primetime's grabbing a drink, and then he's just eating his food source. Well, then, you get there and you see how he's staging in this acorn flat, eating there for 15
Yeah, because you don't know that with one little picture.
No, and then
you have no idea.
Him, and then under the primary scrape, it's just acorns. There wasn't, just covered the scrape. So there's those elements that the trail camera doesn't tell you, but if you're out there, you start seeing that, and then you get to thinking. Just adds a little bit more to it.
Well, it's kind of interesting too when you're talking about just that food plot, that little rain window came in, because those first few hunts was on the front end of that rain, came through, took me out for a few days, had some time with my daughter, and then I came out about a week later, and then that's when I was successful. And that was when the first few hunts, there wasn't the cameraman stand, but you got that up there just in case it wasn't.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And I remember watching the does come through, and they were in that primetime food plot, but I could see all the brassicas, and then I could see like dirt between every plant, and there was like, brassicas, there was plenty of them, but there was a lot of dirt kind of breaking them up, which is normal for that time of year for when we typically plant up here. The brassicas are pretty full, and then they're just going to finish out growing, their flushness. Well, it was such a severe drought, and because we had put the fertilizers and stuff on that shortly before that second rain was coming through, when I started hunting, as soon as that rain came through, within the next week, I didn't even know it was the same food plot, because it literally was just all of a sudden green. Like there was no more dirt I could see from the food plot. Just on the camera, you could see.
You hit it with the spray, with the fertilizers right before the rain, didn't you?
Yeah,
and then that rain came.
Took a video of it, And you can see in Chris's footage from, you go day by day. It's like, oh, there's dirt field. Oh, food plot.
It showed up.
Wasn't even there.
The food plot showed up.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, two big bucks down, and for two ultra deserving people. I know all of us couldn't be happier for you, Chris, and for Adam as well. I know you guys work your butts off and are super deserving. So that's awesome. We're moving now into a time of year where new bucks are going to be showing up. We're going to be focused on scrapes, making those last minute tweaks, at the right times and getting ready to jump in the stand here and take advantage of some good hunting. We do have a few more bucks that were shot here in the last few days by some team members. So we're going to jump in next time on a podcast. So look for that. A few more really big bucks down. So exciting stuff happening here. But guys, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you download the free Deer Society app. Keep up with us on social. There's lots going on. Big buck pictures out there. And again, thanks for listening. Good luck, and thanks for tuning in.
All our sponsors here at Deer Society are partners whose equipment we know we can trust are going to make you more successful and have a better experience in the field. Products like Illusion Systems, maker of the Black Rack, the Extinguisher, and the Phase Body Odor System. Tacticam, Reveal Cell Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Onyx Maps, Osseo Gear, Hooyman, and Big Frig.